What if the savior of a nation hid a monster behind his banners? Imagine the glow of torchlight trembling along stone corridors, shadows bending with every flicker, doors locked against muffled cries, iron bolts sealing secrets that no servant dared to question. By day, Gilles de Rais rode in glory, the golden knight who fought beside Joan of Arc, a man exalted by kings and adored by crowds. By night, within his vast halls, a silence spread more chilling than battlefields. The cheers of France masked whispers that refused to die. A hero on the ramparts, a predator in the chambers. How did France's Golden Knight become one of history's darkest legends? Gilles de Rais was born into wealth so immense that his future seemed carved in gold. Vast estates, towering castles, endless coin, the kind of inheritance that could shape a prince or a tyrant. From childhood, he was groomed not only to inherit land but to carry a legacy. His family whispered of honor, of power, of destiny. On the battlefield, that destiny appeared fulfilled. He rode with banners unfurled, steel flashing beneath the French sun, a commander whose courage drew men forward when fear threatened to consume them. By Joan of Arc's side, he became more than noble, he became myth. France saw in him a savior clad in shining armor, a knight whose name stirred hope where despair once festered. The masses cheered. Trumpets echoed through streets thick with confetti and incense. Processions followed his victories, where musicians played, dancers whirled, and poets sang his praises until the air itself seemed drunk with admiration. He basked in it, the applause, the spectacle, the adoration that wrapped around him tighter than any cloak. But glory has a hunger, and Gilles fed it without restraint. Gold spilled into lavish pageants, into endless entertainments, into halls decorated with silks and tapestries richer than many noblemen's treasuries. His feasts ran until dawn, his theatrics grew bolder, and each triumph demanded a grander display. Yet behind every candlelit stage, a shadow thickened, for applause in daylight could not drown the whispers at night. Stone walls rose like sentinels against the Breton sky, but within them lay corridors designed for more than defence. Gilles de Rais's castles were labyrinths of grandeur and concealment. Tapestries muffled sound, torchlight bent against hidden alcoves, and locked doors led to chambers no guest would ever see. Architecture became a weapon, masking what should never have been. Servants moved through these halls with lowered eyes. They obeyed, not out of loyalty, but out of fear and out of coin. Silence became profitable, and in that silence, horrors thrived. Those who questioned too much were dismissed, and those who stayed learned quickly that obedience was the only path to survival. Outside the walls, villagers whispered of children who vanished, a boy who went to deliver bread and never returned, a girl seen chasing fireflies at dusk, gone by morning. The murmurs rippled outward like rings in a pond, yet they met shrugs, excuses, and the weight of Gilles's untouchable rank. Who could accuse a war hero, a knight blessed by Joan herself? But corridors do not forget. Behind walls lined with gold thread tapestries, the darkest rooms stayed locked. The villagers around Gilles de Rais's estates grew uneasy. Mothers lingered longer at doorways, calling their children back before dusk. Fathers searched the fields and riverbanks for sons who should have returned by nightfall but did not. Fear thickened in the air, a presence heavier than the morning fog that clung to the countryside. In confessionals, priests heard stories whispered through trembling lips. A child missing after being summoned to the castle. A servant who claimed to have seen small shoes abandoned in a corridor. Yet the priests hesitated, bound by fear of power and the silence of the church. To speak was dangerous, and so their knowledge sat heavy in their throats, unspoken but never forgotten. Rumours spread like smoke. Market stalls became places of hushed exchange, women clutching bread as they traded suspicions, men lowering voices as they spoke of shadows on the road leading to the gates. No one dared accuse openly, but unease seeped into every gathering. Eventually, even the walls of authority began to tremble. The whispers had grown too loud, too persistent, too numerous to ignore. The church began to listen, and the crown could not look away. Testimonies began to surface, each one a fragment of the same grim mosaic. Ecclesiastical courts gathered the words of peasants and servants, and though each account wavered with fear, the pattern could not be dismissed. A boy lured to the castle gates, a servant ordered into silence. A disappearance explained away with hollow excuses. Piece by piece, a mirror was forming, and in its reflection stood Gilles de Rais. Yet the secular authorities hesitated. To accuse a noble of such stature was to shake the kingdom's foundations. He was not only a knight but a symbol, a man once cloaked in divine approval through his service beside Joan of Arc. Scandal threatened stability, and hesitation became a shield against truth, but fortune had already begun to unravel him. The gold that once poured into pageantry now drained into reckless extravagance. His coffers emptied, his debts multiplied, and creditors pressed harder with each passing season. Desperation bred mistakes, letters written too hastily, bargains struck too boldly, loyalties stretched too thin. The invincible knight began to stumble, and as his defences cracked, the whispers converged into something sharper. Soon the hunter would find himself surrounded. The fall came not on a battlefield but within his own halls. Soldiers stormed the fortress where once only fear had reigned, their boots striking against the stone as banners of authority replaced the banners of a knight. Gilles de Rais, clad not in shining armour but in silks of comfort, was seized before the very servants who had long learned silence. The corridors that had hidden his secrets now echoed with the clash of steel and the heavy tread of captors. Charges were read aloud, each word chipping away at the image of a hero. The litany of accusations spilled like a poison into the air. Heresy, sorcery, murder. The name once sung in triumph now rang like a curse in every chamber. Witnesses were called, and the veil that had cloaked him for years tore open thread by thread. Interrogations followed, relentless and damning. Accounts from servants, villagers, even accomplices painted a picture so vast, so grotesque, that denial seemed hollow. Each testimony confirmed another, until the mountain of voices grew too heavy for even his title to withstand. Yet behind the testimonies, one question lingered, gnawing at judges and priests alike. What had driven a knight of France, a man of banners and glory, into the abyss? But the question still burned: why? Speculation darkened the courtrooms as much as the testimonies did. Was it privilege that rotted him from within, the knowledge that wealth and lineage placed him above consequence? Some said vanity had consumed him, a hunger for control that no battlefield could satisfy. Others whispered of darker pursuits, rituals, invocations, occult obsessions that sought power not from crown or church but from shadows older than both. The silence of his allies became as damning as their words. Servants who obeyed orders, priests who turned away, nobles who accepted his coin. Power insulated him, shielding him from suspicion, making complicity a currency as valuable as gold. For years, his cruelty thrived not in isolation but in the silence of others. He could command armies, he could silence priests, he could buy loyalty, but he could not cage himself. The very appetite that had made him magnificent on the battlefield became the appetite that consumed him in secret halls. What he conquered with sword and banner, he sought again behind locked doors, chasing a triumph that would never satisfy. And when the walls closed in, the reckoning came not just for him, but for all who stood by. Crowds gathered as they once had for his triumphs, but now their voices carried no cheers. The square filled with faces strained between horror and fascination, watching the man who had ridden beside Joan of Arc stand shackled before judges and priests. His trial unspooled a litany of crimes so vast that even his defenders faltered, their words collapsing beneath the weight of testimony. The Golden Knight was no longer a saviour, but a symbol of corruption unveiled. Sentence followed swiftly. Condemned for heresy, sorcery, and the destruction of innocence, Gilles de Rais faced the fate he had long escaped. On the day of execution, the same hands that once waved banners now clutched rosaries. The same mouths that once praised now whispered prayers. Fire rose where once there had been pageantry, and the spectacle of his end etched itself into memory. In the aftermath, France was left with more than ashes. The trial spurred reforms, questions of power, and a warning that no title could shield a man forever. His legacy became a stain, a shadow cast across the idea of chivalry itself. The corridors are empty now, the torches long extinguished, but the shadow of Gilles de Rais still lingers in the history of power unchained.